Okay, and what we want to do in this video is really, and hopefully you're excited to start off your very first look at Unit 2, which is the microeconomics segment of the IB Economics course. In order to do this, what I want to do is kind of give you a quick introduction of what microeconomics is essentially, even though we've covered the definition in the previous video. But right now what we're going to be doing is looking at what a market is, demand, supply, equilibrium, all these things in the one video. Now, this is the start, even though I will be giving you an introduction, and not even that, I'll be going all the way to the end of where we want to understand, where we want to get ourselves to. The focus of this playlist is firstly on demand. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, this is really important because we're going to start to look at what are called competitive markets. And competitive markets, particularly if you're doing HL economics at the very, very end of microeconomics, you'll be doing a unit that the SLs won't do. And we'll go deep into all the different characteristics of competitive markets. But just at the moment, what I want you to do is I want you to see there's loads of different stalls here and there's loads of different people here. Now, essentially, and I'm not going to go into what a market is because I think you know what it is, but essentially what a market is a collection of buyers and sellers. Right, that's all it is. We've got lots of people selling here and lots of people buying here and here. Now, this is really important, okay? A competitive market, the only kind of characteristic that I'm going to go into now is that there are loads and loads of buyers and loads of sellers, and they're all selling the exact same thing. So if all of these were selling oranges, or let's say these are all selling flowers and all of these are selling flowers, they're all selling the same type of flowers. And if I took a bit of flowers from this, or a bunch of flowers from this stall, and a bunch of flowers from this stall, and a bunch of flowers from this stall, and I just put them in front of you and said which flowers came from which stall, you couldn't tell based on the product. So the product is exactly the same, or as we say, homogeneous. And also because there's so much choice on behalf of the consumer and the producer. So if I'm a consumer and this person's charging €100,000 for a bunch of flowers and this one's charging €1, I'll just be like, okay, I'll go over here. So it really kind of forces prices down. Now that's all I'm going to say about competitive markets, okay? Now, but the thing that I want you to understand is that a market-based economy is an economy that relies on markets to answer the three basic economic questions. And what are they? Okay, what's to be produced, how is it to be produced, and who gets it? Now, those questions must be asked and answered in order for an economy to exist. And what is an economy? And I feel an economy is a means of satisfying people's material desires. Okay, that's what an economy is. But so that means, well, we have to know, okay, what to produce in order to satisfy those desires. In order to beat the competition, we have to produce them the cheapest, and then the people that are willing to pay the most, we try and sell it to them. And what I want you to understand is those actions that drive a market economy. So then if we know that they're really important, well, then that's something that we should answer and say, okay, well, what's a market? But before we do that, because I want to I'm going to bring in the diagram of market equilibrium. This is the question, this is one of the two questions that we've already identified in the introduction playlist, which is real world issue number one, which microeconomics tries to solve in inverted commas, which is how do consumers and producers make decisions in trying to meet their economic objectives. Now, we've already talked about utility, okay, for the consumer's utility maximizes. They're trying to buy the goods and services at the lowest price so that they can buy more stuff which will make them happy. And what are they chasing? The most amount of happiness from their limited income. That's what consumers are chasing. So that's utility maximization. On the other hand, we make the assumption for producers that's profit maximization. So they're going to produce a certain quantity of goods where they can get the most profit from selling those goods. Okay, so keep that in mind. How do consumers and producers make decisions in trying to meet their economic objectives? All the way through with the 9 central themes, we're through microeconomics, with the 9 central themes through the entirety of the course. We're going to be trying to answer this question and one other. Okay, so what is a market? All right, this is the definition. A market is where buyers and sellers come together to carry out an economic transaction. An economic transaction, never get confused, guys. It's simply buying or selling. If I am the seller, I'm going to sell you something. If I'm the buyer, I'm going to buy something from you. That's what a market is. Now, keep this in mind. So this here is an example of a market. All right. So what we are saying is how we in a capitalist or a market-based economy answer those questions is through markets. Now that's very strange, because who's in charge of a market? Nobody. Okay, so that's the weird thing, is that why am I a teacher? Well, I like teaching and I'm happy with the pay that I get. But if I'm not, if one of those two things changes, I'm going to do something else. Who's telling me to do that? Nobody but myself. Who's telling these people to set up there and sell fruit and veg? Nobody. There is no central planner. And yet that's the thing that people do not get. There is only individuals going into Adam Smith here, trying to take care of their self-interest, that they have shown up and they said, if I show up here with fruit at this market, on this day, in this place, and try and sell fruit at the price that I am capable and happy to sell for, people will buy from me. And if I'm continuously happy, I'm talking about this guy here, if I'm continuously happy to sell these things, to continue to receive the payment that I am receiving from my customers in my action of selling them these fruits and vegetables, I will continue to show up. If something else comes along that I'm aware of, in terms of one of my friends says to me, there's great jobs, for argument's sake, down the mines, there's great jobs, for argument's sake, working in the cinema, there's great pay, for argument's sake, writing a book, I may change my mind and stop showing up here in order to try to increase the amount of profit, it's a seller, so it's profit maximizers, that I can get elsewhere. And that's the thing that I think it's the hardest thing for students to get their mind around. There's no central planner. Nobody's forcing them to do this. They have just decided that, I reckon right now, knowing what I know, being able to do what I'm able to do, I can get fruit to this market every whatever day, maybe it is, whatever, how many times they meet. And I know that I'll make a profit if I sell it, and I'm happy with that profit. As soon as I stop being happy with that profit, or I start suffering a loss, I will stop opening up this stall, and I'll go and do something else. Now, I know that's long-winded, and I'm trying to appeal to your intelligence so that it makes intuitive sense within you. Okay, so look, all I'm going to say is there are many different types of markets. Okay, so there's a product market which just sells goods and services to consumers. They're finished. They're ready to eat. They're ready to use. Okay, then there's another thing called a factor market. Right now, that's where factors of production are bought and sold. Now, look, labor, yes, is a factor of production, but the person himself or herself isn't. Okay, so you're not buying the person, you're buying their labor, and you can only buy their labor if they are willing to sell it to you. All right, so just to be clear for that. But it also exists for capital, it also exists for land, right? And in the stock market, now I think the stock market is essentially a factor market where factors of production are bought and sold. But because what are you buying when you buy stocks? Well, essentially you're buying part of a company, and that means you own the factors of production that are owned by that company, so therefore it's a factor market, but I just thought I'd put it in anyway. Now, I am, giving some of my opinions here, disagree, agree, whatever you want. All I'm saying is from all of my study and experience, this is the things that I know. Okay, a capitalist economy, this is not opinion, but a capitalist economy relies on prices to answer the three basic economic questions. And prices are determined in markets by the interaction of demand and supply. So going back to the guy that was selling the fruit, I know he will have a sign saying this is what I'm selling stuff for, but don't forget, he always wants to get the highest price. And then the consumer wants to pay the lowest price. So there's two diametrically opposed desires. And how can they come together in a market peacefully? Okay? So I want you to understand the markets are made up of buyers and sellers. So whatever the price is, this lady here can say, oh, half it. And then this person here who's selling it off screen can say, no, double it. All right? So buyers and sellers. We say buyers represent demand. That's all we're saying here. The people that are buying the stuff, factor market or product market, represent demand. Suppliers represent what are called supplies. So the sellers, the suppliers, the firm, they're the supply side of the market, okay? And the focus of this immediate playlist of videos is going to be demand, but obviously we're going to go on to supply and equilibrium. And with that in mind, I just want to introduce something that's really, really important here. Now, before we start, We are going to look at something which is called the Microeconomics Rule of 11. I got this off my very good friend and economics teacher, Brad Cartwright. Give his channel a look. I'm sure it's fantastic, okay? It's the Microeconomics Rule of 11. So what I'm going to do now, as I get older in my teaching, I think that give the students where we're trying to get to, trying to understand, and then work our way up to this point. Now, you don't know anything yet, or maybe you do, but you are not required to know anything. You're not even required to understand this diagram. I just want you to be aware of a rule when drawing diagrams in microeconomics. That's all I want to do right now. Now, what we have here, the first thing we have here is a title, and this is the market for coffee. On this axis, what we are doing here is we are measuring price. As I move up this axis, price rises. As I move down this axis, price falls. Remember, now I'd take a note here. The first thing I said is you need a title. We're going to get to 11 things. The next thing that I said was you need to label, I didn't say this, but you need to label this axis, which is price. This is the price axis. The third thing I'm going to say now is you need a currency, whatever the currency is in the question, or you can just choose your own. Usually people choose dollars just because it's the world currency, at least for the moment. Let's keep an eye on the Chinese RMB. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3. We're trying to build our way up to 11. 11 elements that you need to draw the perfect diagram in microeconomics. Okay, one, we've got a title, we've got the price, we've got the currency, we've got the origin, which is 0 here. So that means that this is here 0, 0. So then this axis here measures the quantity, okay, of the good or service, in this case coffee, that was sold and bought. This is in, so that's, sorry now, I've lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 amounts and per time period. Okay, so we've got the title, the price, the currency, the origin, the quantity labeled, the amount of the quantity, and the time period. I believe that's 6. Okay, then what we've got here is the demand curve. This represents the desire for all buyers. Okay, and we need the D1. You don't understand, or you don't know, and you're not required to know. Like maybe you do, and that's great. I'm saying don't be worried that you don't understand what this is. This is the demand curve. All we're saying here is that at higher prices, people buy less. As price falls, people buy more. Okay, as price rises, people buy less. That's the supply curve. So we need the D1 and the S1 there. Okay, as price rises, firms are willing and able to supply more. We'll come to why. This point here represents the equilibrium point. It is from the voluntary interactions. This curve here is the demand curve, represents buyers. This curve here is the supply curve, represents sellers. It is from the voluntary interaction of these two separate groups of people that prices are brought about in a market. So what we have here is PEQ1, that is the market price that all coffee will be sold for. And QEQ1, that is the quantity that of all coffee that will be sold. Now, look, what does this mean? This means this is the equilibrium price. Why is this the equilibrium price? Well, it's the price that brings about the quantity demanded and supplied to be the same. Do not worry why these things are the same. It's the amount the firms are willing and able to sell is the exact same as the amount that consumers are willing and able to buy. PEQ. Price, equilibrium price, 1. Make sure you always put a number there, okay? Make sure, because it can and will change, and we're going to have to draw diagrams about how it changes. And QEQ1, it's the equilibrium quantity, where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied, and there's no tendency for price to change, and that's the first one. So let's go through this. We've got the market, that's 1. The title, which is market for coffee. The price, that's 2. The currency, that's 3. The equilibrium price with a number, that's 4. The origin, that's 5. The equilibrium quantity with a number, that's 6. The label on the quantity axis, that's 7. The units that it's measured in, that's 8. The timeline that all of these goods are bought and sold, that's 9. The D1 for the demand curve, we've labeled it D1 because this is the first demand curve. There may be another one, that's 10. And the S1 for the supply curve, we're labeling it S1 because there may be another, and not to worry why or why not, that's 11. That is the rule for drawing microeconomics graphs, particularly when we go from equilibrium all the way through. Now, as I said, we're going to stick with demand for the moment. And I know this video is long and I apologize, but I just want to make you aware of the existence of a few things. Okay, so what's the definition of demand that has to be learned off word perfect? The willingness and ability of consumers to purchase a quantity of a good or service. Now that is really important. I'll say it again. The willingness and ability, the desire and the money of consumers to purchase a quantity of good or service. Now supply, this is the willingness and ability of producers to produce a quantity of a good or service. Then maybe more than willing. But guys, it's not about that. It's you have to be willing and able. You have to get the job done. Okay? And we've already seen how they interact to give us prices, where the two cross. And then don't forget, we're going to be looking at competitive markets. Now, what are we saying here? This is really important. And I would like to shape your thinking. And if none of this makes sense, skip this video and move on. It's fine. Okay, just get through to the demand, supply, and then when you get back to market equilibrium, then you should understand everything that I've said here. So buyers, who are represented by the demand curve, and sellers, who are represented by the supply curve, combine together to make a market. Markets, as we see where the two lines cross, they make prices. Prices affect how consumers and producers make decisions. What was the real world issue number one that we already talked about? Okay, how do consumers and producers make decisions to maximize their respective desires? Prices then are used to allocate society's scarce resources, which have alternative uses, and yes, they are. And then when that means that prices answer the three basic questions of economics. Because they're determined in the market. If I'm not happy with the price, I leave. If I'm not happy with the price as a seller, I leave. If I'm not happy with the price that I have to pay as a consumer, I don't buy it. Okay, so it's in that way that the prices help make the decisions for consumers and producers. Now, I'm just going to go quickly through this, okay, so that people have competing wants and needs, and it's through the market system that these needs are best met, and I do believe that. And don't forget, we've got product markets and we've also got factor markets. Okay, now, the second last thing, is a laissez faire economy. The view that markets should be left alone with minimal intervention by government. Now that's not enough for me. The IB hasn't done a good job there. What they really should have said was, and in doing so, they should have finished it off, are bringing about the greatest result for society in terms of material well-being. Okay, that's what that really means. It's not that it's just money for rich people or money for bankers or money for businessmen or women. It's that if you allow people the freedom to be and do as they wish, as long as they are respecting the rights of others, to voluntarily engage in trade with others, no coercion and force, society materially has a much higher well-being than it would with government intervention. That's the belief behind laissez faire. And also a much higher sense of well-being with political life as well. So demand, we've said, is the willingness and ability of consumers to purchase a quantity of a good or service. Now, as I've said, the word able is very, very important. You only demand something at a certain price if you buy the good at that price. And the example that I use here is always with my class is, who wants a Ferrari? Well, everybody puts up their hands usually. And I said, okay, what if it's $1? Then everybody puts up their hand. And I said, what if it's $250,000? Everyone still wants it. But I said, who is $250,000 to give me for a Ferrari? And nobody does. Okay, so as the price changed from $1, we had like 30 people wanting it. And then up to $250,000, we had nobody being able to afford it. The quantity demanded changed there because of the price. Okay, so able is very important. If you're willing to pay the price being asked but cannot afford to pay that price, then you don't demand it. Okay, now, look, there's this thing called effective demand that I've heard shouted out a few times. It's the exact same thing as demand, even though don't even bother learning this off. I don't want you to learn this off. Just, if you ever hear define effective demand, it's just give the definition for demand. Essentially what effective demand is trying to emphasize is that it's not just your desire for the good or service, it's that you're willing and able to pay the money for that good or service. Now, so let's just have a quick look here and let's see what we can come up with. Now, this is a fancy car, okay? We've got Adam, Brian and Carol. All right, so don't forget, what are we saying demand requires? The desire to buy something and the money to buy something. But Carol is going to make a very important point here. Adam doesn't want it. Well, if he doesn't want it, he neither has the willingness nor the ability to pay the price, so therefore he doesn't demand it. Okay, Brian, I want it, but I can't afford it. So he's got the willingness, he's got the desire for the good, but he doesn't have the ability to purchase it. So therefore he doesn't demand it. Now this is really important. I want it and I can afford it. Carol still hasn't demanded it yet. Boom. So I buy it. Now, once she has bought it, that means she has demanded it at that price. Whatever the price was, she has demanded it at that price. So therefore I demand it. It has to have been bought in order to truly be demanded. And you can say, oh, like statisticians can use models, this, that, and the other to predict and try and calculate or infer what demand is. Yeah, fine. In reality, you have to have bought it. Now, guys, I know this is a long video. I really, really hope this helped. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.